Thanks so much to Needed for sponsoring today's video. More on them in just a bit. My scenery is a little bit different today, and I'm so excited because today I'm going to finally be sharing with you my kitchen garden redesign and show you how I made it from the ground up. Before, I had a really rundown kitchen garden, and since I love to cook healthy foods, it's so beneficial to have a bunch of my own vegetables growing organically in the backyard. So I knew it was something I wanted to kind of just pour my heart into, because not only do I love healthy food, but I love the beauty of gardens, and just gardening itself is so beneficial to us. I really wanted to dive in and just redesign it completely, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. It's just a small kind of cozy kitchen garden, and I don't live on tons and tons of acres or anything. I'm just in a normal neighborhood. So if you're interested in putting in a backyard garden too, hopefully this is inspirational to you, because this is something a lot of us can do in a normal size backyard. So if you're interested in garden tours and garden design, then I think this video will be really fun to see, because I'm going to show you exactly how me and my husband and really my whole family did it from the ground up. So starting with how we prep the ground, the beds, the trellises, how I'm intermingling plants and flowers, and so much more. So I'm so excited to take you through how we redesigned my kitchen garden from start to finish. I started this garden makeover by fixing up my chicken coop area that was starting to look just a little bit broken and falling apart. I have a chicken run and a chicken coop, and I knew I wanted to paint the chicken coop white with a little bit of barn paint. And then we ended up planting some little grass plants and adding some copper solar lights and just filling in the space so that it felt a lot more cozy. Gardenias and a little tree that mimics a cypress tree, just to make it look more filled in and more mature around the beds. And then we started prepping the ground by laying down landscape fabric across the entire area. And I think this area spans, I want to say, about 23 feet or so. So we laid down landscape fabric along the whole thing. And then we have these huge 2x2 stones, and I just picked these up locally at my hardware store, because when I'm walking through the garden, I love the feel of stones under my feet versus pebbles. So I have lots of stones that take up a lot of square footage, and then I have pea gravel around those stones. I didn't put any gravel under the beds, just landscape fabric, and then I pushed all the stones around the beds once we had started building them. I spent a lot of time researching the best raised beds, and I love the look of wood beds, and I know that cedar lasts the longest in the garden. So I was able to find these beds. They're all natural and they're kiln dried. They fit together almost like tongue and groove, and they have metal rods that reinforce everything. And then I got the kind that have wood edging and wood trim, which reinforces it, gives you a little seat if you want to sit on your garden bed, and they are incredible. So these are cedar raised beds. I'll link my exact ones down below. They hold together really well, and they were so easy to build. We built these all in about one afternoon, me and my husband. They have the classic version, which looks basically just like this, but I opted for the ones that are reinforced with wooden edge going up the sides and then a wooden trim around the top, just so that they last as long as possible. So once we had the ground prepared and we had the beds mostly built, I actually waited to put the trim on this particular bed because I thought it would be easier to fill it and then finish the trim just so everything stayed nice and tidy. We went ahead with a 103 soil mix. So this basically means equal parts of native topsoil, coarse sand, and compost. I like to use mushroom compost. And then I also add in a little bit of earthworm castings just to help amend it and almost work as fertilizer, because we want our soil to be the best it possibly can be, just so I can try to avoid so many problems that pop up with soil. And I remember being a first-time gardener and I didn't think too much about the soil, and then my plants just never thrived. So now I'm really careful about the blends I select. I make sure I know other people who are already using them, so that way I know that I have a good chance of success using it too. I did a bunch of research on different kind of ways to create a raised bed mix, and that's essentially what this is, but it works a lot better than the stuff you can buy at the store that usually has a bunch of wood chunks in it. So this is much more rich and loamy, and you can feel it in your hand. If you squeeze it, you can feel it come together, but then it will easily fall apart, and most plants enjoy that kind of soil. And since I don't own a pickup truck or any sort of machinery, I got this mostly delivered in pallets. And normally when you buy in bulk, you think loose instead of in bags, but I was actually able to get a good discount for buying a whole pallet. So you can look into different ways of doing it so you can try to save money, but make sure you're getting something that is going to pay you back in good quality plants. So once the beds were made, they were filled, all the gravel and the stones had been laid out, it was time to put in irrigation. So you can water by hand or you can do irrigation, and I highly recommend doing some kind of drip irrigation. And over the years I've done little drip lines to soaker hoses, but now after looking to try to find good raised bed hoses and drip irrigation, I finally came across this grid system, and everything is kind of connected on two different lines, and they have custom length hoses, so there's not a bunch of loose hoses all in the garden. They're kind of shorter, and just it keeps it nice and neat and tidy. And I have been loving it so far because each 1 foot square has little streams of water that squirt out in basically all directions going towards the center. So everything is evenly watered, and it just makes it so easy to make sure that every plant in that square is getting enough water. It also makes it really easy for planting because when I have a 1 foot square to work with, I can easily replicate it on both sides, or I know exactly what I want to put in that 1 square foot. So it's like square foot gardening made even easier because it's just built in with your drip irrigation. So once I had that all installed, I installed plenty of trellises, and I'm still going to be installing the big arch trellis right in the center, so lots of room to grow vertically. I love being able to come out here with my morning coffee or just my morning smoothie, and lately I've been putting my vitamin in it from Needed in my smoothie, and that is why today's video is sponsored by Needed. So let me tell you a little bit more about them. As a mom of 4, I am super passionate about women's health, especially when it comes to our childbearing years. 95% of women are depleted in one key nutrient despite taking a prenatal. That is why I'm so excited to partner with Needed on today's video. Needed spent over 3 years developing their nutritional system with practitioners who test women's hormones and nutrient levels throughout every stage: fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and just lifelong health in general. And they have created that in 2 different forms with 26 nutrients that are in their optimal form and at their optimal dosage. So it comes in both their capsules, or you can get it in the vanilla powder form, which I personally find so helpful because when I was pregnant with all 4 of my children, I had horrible hyperemesis. I love being able to just make this up quickly in the morning. I could take it out there in the garden and sit down and enjoy it. And I know as a nutritionist that the whole time during your childbearing years, it's actually really important to stay on a prenatal in case you ever do become pregnant. So I take mine now and I'll continue taking it. This one I firmly believe in and can recommend it. Right now, Needed is offering 20% off your order. So head to the link in my description box and use code HEALTHYELIZABETH at checkout. I've been to several different nurseries and the farmer's market, and I have a collection of starts that I've gotten there that they start the exact same thing that I start, same varieties and everything, same quality. So I find it a lot easier to source a lot of those things. And then of course flowers that I'm filling in with, I love to find those locally at really good nurseries too. But I also want to show you my seed starting because I've started about 3 trays, so 72 cells each, and the first tray I think I overwatered, but the last 2 are actually going really well. So I wanted to share with you what I'm doing. So I start by getting a huge container outside and I put all of my organic seedling mix in here and I wet it until it is really nice and damp. And then I pack it into my cells just lightly, and then I'll give them a little tap on whatever surface I'm using that's hard. So a table or your dining table, wherever you're doing it, just give it a little tap, and then you'll see that it kind of settles down in your little seed trays, and then I just fill it up a little bit more. So it's loosely packed, but it's all the way to the top. And I just do this with all my little seed trays. I got these from Epic Gardening and I love the quality. They hold up really well. I used to have some older ones, but I left them in the high tunnel for too long and I think the heat just really destroyed them. So these are going to be left inside my house under my light, and I'll link my setup below and exactly what I used because I think it's really good for people who are just starting out with seed starting and don't want to invest thousands of dollars. This is only, I think the setup is about $100 for one. And then I have a huge seed collection. I have hundreds of different seeds that I've collected over the past year or 2. And my favorites are from M.I. Gardner and Baker Creek. So those are 2 of my favorites. But this year I grew mostly M.I. Gardner, and I've never had such good success as I've had with these seeds. So they're super inexpensive and they're nice heirloom quality, and they grew so well. So I have had excellent germination this time. So I'm really pleased with these. I would highly recommend them. So I have a bunch of different things. You know, I have to have dinosaur kale and lettuces. I have bush beans and pole beans, different kinds of tomatoes. And as these things are growing in my garden, I will definitely show you what they look like and what I'm cooking with them. So it'll be fun to kind of see how this comes to life. But all I do is I lay out my seeds, organize them in my trays, and then I'm very careful not to bury them too deep because I have a habit over the past few years of making seeds unable to be germinated. I just plant them too deep or I water them too much. And so I finally kind of learned not to plant them too deep. unless it's a nice big seed like a pumpkin seed or a squash seed. Plant them nice and shallow, just barely cover them, and then I dust them with a little bit of cinnamon, or you could use a little bit of vermiculite just to keep that soil nice and healthy on the top. And then I bottom water only. So I don't like to disturb the tops of the plants and the seeds. I like to just fill water in the bottom of it, and I'll keep them moist with a humidity dome on. So after I water them the first time and put the dome on, I really don't need to water them again until most of them have germinated, because I find that that dome just keeps it really moist, and you don't want them sitting in wet water. You just want to make sure that they're not drying out, because then your seed will die. So I found a really good system. It seems to be working for me now, and I think just don't overwater. If everything starts to turn yellow, that means you've overwatered probably. So I've backed off the water, and now all of my seedlings are just beautiful and dark green. It is so fun as my kids start to get older, watching them take on all these things that I've enjoyed, and they've been watching me for years, and they're finally old enough to start doing exactly what I do. And so my daughter, my oldest one, she has discovered that she loves starting seeds too. And my daughter and my older son are taking over the high tunnel, and they have got so much in there, and they love to harvest their lettuce. So it's just so fun, because you don't think anyone is watching when you're doing these simple things like starting your seeds in your home. But when you have kids, or even grandkids, they're sitting there watching you, and eventually, even if it doesn't seem like they take much interest in it at first, later it seems to come back around. Once all the seeds have been planted and labeled, it's very important to label them. I put the humidity dome on, and I've already bottom watered them, and I turn on a heat mat underneath that fits right in the tray, and turn on the light, because certain seeds need light to germinate, especially flowers, which I have a whole tray of flowers going to. A lot of those are from Floret. I actually use the same seed starting mix as she does, and I think it's fantastic. Now we'll just sit and let those grow. I'm just heading out to the garden, and I'm finishing up my morning coffee right now, but it's the day that I've been waiting for forever. I was sitting inside in the winter waiting for this day, and it's finally here, because I have all my plants right now acquired. My beds are built. We installed the drip irrigation yesterday, so that's pretty much ready to go, but I think I have at least a couple hundred plants that need to get planted today. Okay, so the way that I'm gonna do this today, I don't have it mapped out or written down, but I have a general idea of how I want to do it. And for the most part, I'm gonna have a mixture of a lot of flowers, a lot of herbs, and a hefty amount of vegetables. So normally we're swimming in a ton of tomatoes and peppers, and we just can't eat them all, and they take over the whole garden. So this time I'm trying to do things a little bit differently, and I've got a good mixture of beautiful flowers that are just great for pollinators, beautiful to look at, and you can also snip little bits and bring them inside, put them in a little glass vase that's tiny, and it just sparks joy wherever they are in the house. So I love that, and I love intermingling all my plants. So we're gonna have tons of herbs, and that helps to repel things like squash bugs and aphids and all those things that you don't want. And then I love cooking from it, obviously. So this is definitely gonna be a kitchen style garden, because you know I love to cook plenty of healthy foods. Most of them are going to be heirloom organic, so that's the stuff that I want to be eating. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but that's as good as I can do, and that is good enough for me. So a lot of these plants and seedlings I've sourced locally from really reputable people, and so I just do what I can there. And I'm going to plant this all intermingled, so we're going to have peppers next to flowers and herbs, and so I'm going to kind of lay everything out ahead of time, I think, and then we'll slowly start to plant it. So I'll kind of show you what I'm doing, and I'll talk about how I'm kind of planting it or laying it out and arranging it as I go. So what I'm gonna be doing is intermingling everything and planting to maximize harvest. So since I'm not planting things in rows or planting cabbage next to cabbage next to cabbage, I'm gonna be planting things very close together and intermingling. So in the space where you would normally have one cabbage plant, I'll have a cabbage plant and some herbs, maybe some flowers and lettuce. So we've got small plants, we have our medium plants, and we have large plants, and we intermingle all of those so they can sit really closely together. And there's so many reasons to do do this, whether it's preventing disease or just keeping your soil really, really moist and healthy. So I'll chat about the different benefits of planting like this, but this isn't your normal typical process. I don't look at the seed packets and plant spacing guides. I kind of just do it according to how big you think that plant is going to get. So if you think about a cabbage plant or a kale plant, you can kind of imagine how big those are going to be. So I'll just kind of eyeball the spacing there and plant many little smaller plants next to it. I love it when gardens are symmetrical, so I have a left side that has the left L bed and then the front square, and then the right side mirrors that. So the way I plant these beds, I'm going to just mirror them. So I started on one side and figured out that I wanted taller flowers in the back corners and then variegated ivy on all the corners, and then I tucked in lavender in front of that, and then I ended up putting herbs next to that too. So in each little corner there's herbs and flowers, and then around the border I'll later fill in with even more of those. I know I love that kind of lived-in cottage garden feel, and so I got a bunch of this variegated periwinkle ivy. I love it because it brings lots of greenery and it kind of cascades over the edges of the bed. So originally I wanted to plant nasturtiums or something like that would cascade over, but I couldn't find them, and mine are growing, but they're growing way too slowly. So I found this instead, and it's just beautiful to layer along with a little bit of flowers and herbs right by the edges, and that way it's not all contained in the bed, but it kind of has that wild garden feel. So every corner in all of the beds for the most part are gonna have a little bit of this ivy hanging over. So some of the ivy will naturally be a little bit more scrawny and a little more full. So on all of the front corners and really highly visible corners of the beds, I'm putting in the more full ones, and then the other ones that are maybe in the back corners or around places that you don't see as much visually, I'll just put the ones that are a little less full. So right here in the front, I'll do a nice, beautiful, long trailing one. A great place to begin when you're starting a kitchen garden is to figure out the things you want to grow, whether that be thyme, basil, tomatoes, and compile all of the things that you want to grow, and then start just searching online for what grows well together and make yourself a little list. It can be really simple. In my trellises, I know I'm going to be trellising tons of peppers and tomatoes, but I started by making something beautiful in the middle of them, and so I added, I think it's called Linaria toad flax, and I put these in the middle of my trellises. They add a beautiful purple kind of cottagey color and a little bit of whimsy to the garden, and then I'll have plenty of other space to start trellising my vegetables around that. And I noticed that the bees also really love that, so I just love seeing the bees, the big bumblebees, just buzzing around the garden and pollinating. I knew I wanted to be growing a variety of veggies, so I picked out all of those first, and then I just picked a few flowers and herbs that I wanted to put all around the borders of my beds for both beauty and for pollination. So now I have all of these vines, and we have lavender in the front of the bed, and then on the back corners I have these big bushy yellow flowers, so those are going to be really pretty. And I'm doing everything with symmetry in mind, so I want it to feel balanced on both sides, because to me that's part of what creates just really beautiful visuals. And so I'm gonna have it all kind of be balanced out and just replicate what I do on one side on the other. So now that that is kind of set up where we're kind of gonna put it, I have a bunch of different herbs, and then I also have little flowers like these, and we're gonna go in and create a border garden. So all along the edges are gonna be flowers and herbs, and then in the middle is where we'll plant things like lettuces and kales and all the different veggies, along with up the trellises we'll have cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, all those sorts of things. So around the edges is where I'm gonna fill in now and just make sure that all of those herbs and the rest of our flowers are planted. And it also helps to create some sort of barrier, so that way in the middle our veggies are kind of protected, and it makes this little barrier so that all the insects don't eat up our veggies. I started by just arranging everything and laying it all out. And I think that that is key. So you can lay it out, see it first. And then sometimes I would realize one vegetable was next to a certain herb or another certain vegetable. And so then I could kind of reassess where that needs to go and just kind of fit it together all like a puzzle. So you'll see lots of French tarragon and garlic chives. I've got a little bit of creeping rosemary. And then all around the edges, I have tons of super bells, which are like these beautiful little purple and cream flowers. And I just have those all around the border. And it creates this beautiful ecosystem and kind of like a barrier too. And so not only is it full of herbs, it's also full of vegetables that are going to be protected. So I think this is a great way to go about a kitchen garden. I also tucked in some snapdragons into the front of a lot of my different veggies. And then, of course, anywhere I planted things like squash or peppers, I have herbs tucked in right by them so that everything can just kind of become this beautiful, healthy ecosystem. Here I'm planting a variety of basil called Valentino, and it's actually an old-fashioned Italian basil, and it's a little bit different than some of the other ones. So I made sure to put a couple of these plants together in one bed and then keep that other variety separate in another bed. So there's also a lot of that. So when you're growing many different kinds of tomatoes and many different squashes, it's important to kind of place them in different beds or different spots. That way you can really see what you're working with. So I have a lot of basil over here so I can remember that it's this variety and see how it works and compare and contrast it to the other variety. So it's also a lot of experiments going on here just so I can see which varieties I prefer or which varieties are growing better. So here is a great example of what I mean with companion planting. I'm first taking a flower here and I'm planting that towards the border of my garden. And then inside in the interior, so closer to the middle of the beds, I'm planting an eggplant plant, and then next to it I'm planting a thyme plant. And I'm doing this because eggplant and thyme are good to grow together because the thyme helps to repel pests like moths, but then it also enhances the growth of the eggplant. So by planting those together, you're actually benefiting each other and you're also yielding more food. So instead of just growing an eggplant or just a bunch of thyme in that spot, I put them together and the eggplant grows nice and long and the thyme just kind of stays there, kind of smaller and bushier. And so you're able to grow those two side by side in the same spacing. Another example is right here in the corner of my beds. I have the variegated ivy, which just grows off the side. Then I'm tucking in a little bit of French tarragon. And right behind that, I'm putting a lavender plant. And in the same square, I was able to fit in some lettuce as well. So you can really pack a lot close and everything grows really nicely. And it keeps the soil really moist and healthy. So everything works together. I'm a huge fan of green goddess dressings and putting a lot of herbs in my salad, so I made sure to plant plenty of garlic chives. They're also great for repelling bugs. Japanese beetles, slugs, aphids, cabbage worms, all of those are really repelled by garlic chives, but then they're also beneficial for bees, so it's perfect to plant all around your border. I know a lot of us gardeners grow a lot of tomatoes, either for fresh eating or for canning. And so things that are really healthy for those in companion planting are basil. So that's like earlier when I planted the Valentino basil next to my trellises because I know I'm going to have tomatoes trellising up. And then along with my tomatoes, I do beans. So any sort of sugar snap pea or pole bean, I just put right along that trellis. And since they're so small and they grow so quickly, you can have those growing at the same time as your tomatoes. And then they're also good for carrots. So after I plant all that, I can go in with a sprinkle of carrot seeds since those are better to direct sow. And then everything will be planted in place and you'll have things being able to be harvested in succession. So first we'll have maybe the pole bean or lettuce and herbs, and then later we'll have the peppers. So everything just slowly starts to trickle in so it's easy to eat fresh from your garden. This day we were planting started out a little bit cloudy and quickly turned into just the brightest, hottest summer day. And I thought it was such a little miracle because after we had spent all day working and planting this garden, as soon as we went to plant the last couple of plants, a rainstorm moved in and showered the whole thing with the most beautiful summer rainstorm. I am so grateful for this garden and for you coming along with me today through this journey. I love to just be in here now and have peace and quiet in the craziness of life in the world. I feel like this garden is just my little sacred space. And so I encourage you, no matter how small or big it may be, create some sort of peaceful place so you can retreat from the world a little bit and really just focus on quietude. Quietude is so good for us and our souls. And so I appreciate this space for not only the beautiful flowers and the food it gives to nourish our body, but also the nourishment of soul, of just that quietude and rejoicing in the wholesome things that life has to offer. It's been so fun to come out here and shoot little things to share with you guys and everything. And it's so refreshing because normally I'm in my little kitchen cooking a bunch of food. And so to just be able to switch it up and share some other things with you guys has been so fun. So make sure you hit subscribe because there's going to be a whole lot more of these kinds of videos too. And thank you so much for joining me in the garden.